අපගේ පර්යේෂණ කණ්ඩායමට නිසි නායකත්වය ලබා දෙමින් අපගේ සියලු පර්යේෂණ අවශ්‍යතා නිසි අයුරින් සොයා බලා නොපිරිහෙලා ඉටු කරන කොළඹ වෛද්‍ය පීඨයේ පර්යේෂණ උන්නතිය සඳහා ඇති අංශයේ අධ්‍යක්ෂක භෞත වේද අංශයේ ජ්‍යෙෂ්ඨ කතිකාචාර්ය වෛද්‍ය දේශාන දිසානායක මැතිණියනි, අප මෙතෙක් ලබා ඇති පර්යේෂණ දත්ත හා නිගමනවල සංක්ෂිප්ත වාර්තාවක් ඉදිරිපත් කිරීමට ඔබටයි මේ ආරාධනය.
நன்றி உபவேந்தர் அவர்களே. அடுத்தபடியாக சிரேஷ்ட விரிவுரையாளரும் குழு தலைவரும் ஆய்வுக்குழுவின் ஒருங்கிணைப்பாளருமான மருத்துவ பீடத்தின் டாக்டர் டில்ஷானி திசாநாயக்க அவர்களை தியானம் தொடர்பாக நரம்பியல் அடிப்படைகளின் சுருக்கம் பற்றி உரை நிகழ்த்த அன்புடன் அழைக்கிறேன்.
Thank you very much, Madam. May I kindly invite Dr. Dilshani Disanayaka, Senior Lecturer of the Department of Physiology, Team Leader and Coordinator of our research group, Director of the Research Promotion and Facilitation Center of the Faculty of Medicine, to give the introduction to the AHEAD research project and give the outline of neural basis of meditation, as well as present the summary of the findings of our study.
Thank you, Kumarangi, James, Chamila. A very pleasant and a safe morning to all of you. Welcome to the inaugural meeting again. A warm welcome to all of you on site and online. The meditation program today, as you have heard, the full credit goes to Professor Chandrika Vijayaratna, our Vice Chancellor, for initiating the process and giving us the leadership. And we appreciate the support and the contribution given by our Dean to carry out the activity. Thank you both and welcome to the program again. My task today is to give you a very brief overview of neurophysiology of meditation. Manasa ha අපේ ස්නායු වෙන ආකාරය ගැන කතා කිරීමට උත්සාහයක් දරනවා මුලින්ම. එතකොට ඔයගලන්ට පොඩි අදහසක් එනවා අපේ ඇතුලේ මොනවද විශේෂයෙන්ම අපේ ස්නායු පද්ධතිය ඇතුලේ මොනවද වෙන්නේ අපි මෙඩිටේට් කරනකොට කියලා. ඒක ඉංග්‍රීසි භාෂාවෙන් මම කරනවා. ඒ අපහැදි තැනක් තියෙනවා නම් ඔයගලන්ට ඊට පස්සේ බලන්න පුළුවන්. After that, I'll be introducing you to the research project briefly and give you some of the findings, preliminary findings that we have, so that you will get an idea as to the benefits which we have found through research, very strict, following very strict protocols, so that it will motivate you to be in the process and continue with us. So, Professor John Yates is a neuroscientist. He has written a nice book called Mind Illuminated. If you have access, you can read it. He defines meditation as a science, a systematic process of training the mind. So what I'm trying to do today is to connect mind with neuronal structures and functions of our body. So through meditation, what we try to do initially is to concentrate and to maintain stable attention. Most of the methods that we will be using today and in the future will be based on concentration and stable attention. So while we practice this, we have found, scientists have found, that people have increased awareness of the present moment. One of the definitions of mindfulness. So you are very familiar with the word mindfulness because Western world, they use the term mindfulness to define meditation practices. So with this, when we practice concentrating and maintaining stable attention, we develop increased awareness of the present moment. And also we get reduction in something called inner chatter. This is also a very common term that is used nowadays. Inner chatter. We'll see what this inner chatter is. Inner chatter is what we have in ourselves, the conversations that we have with us, with our own self. We plan, we make scripts, we comment, we judge all by ourselves. So some of us have a very, complicated inner that actually kind of hinder us to maintain concentration and to maintain stable attention. So one of the outcomes of meditation is to reduce this. So to look at this inner chatter, you need to have a brief idea about how our neuronal structure is made. So this is a diagram of the brain. There are different lobes in the brain, and scientists, researchers have found that these different lobes are important to carry out different functions. Now, if you look at the one at the front, the frontal lobe, it's important for thinking, planning, judging. We call them as higher functions of humans. And the parietal lobe, the one in our brain, but for you to, it's easier to understand when it's the parietal lobe is responsible to receive information and to make sense of information happening around you, happening even inside the body, pain, touch. All this information will go to the parietal lobe, and then you will try to make sense of this information. When you try to make sense of information, you use memory, and also sometimes you use your emotional experiences as well. And you have the temporal lobe, which are important for hearing and all these go to the parietal lobe to give you a full picture of who you are, where you are. And if you're deciding to respond to it, the information will go to the frontal lobe where you think and plan and carry out the activity. So some of the activities that we do, we think, plan. Some activities based on the stimulus can be emotionally driven. Someone can make you angry or sad, and you respond quickly. So we call it checking. And then your response is more emotionally driven, more than rationally driven. So this inner chatter that we have, the conversation activity in the connections prefrontal cortex. So the activity is planned based on a balance between these. So just a diagram to show you where the structures are. When you join with us continuously, you will get functions and the connections. So remember the word prefrontal cortex, which is emotional area, so limbic cortex, which is deep several connections between different structures for us to function this way. For me to talk, for you all to sit, to listen, all these structures are continuously highly active. And for us to respond, to change behavior, all these should have cross communications. So why do we have this inner chatter, and why are we trying to reduce inner chatter through meditation? So inner chatter is made of sensory inputs, whatever that we see, whatever we hear, we need to be aware, we need to have our responses generated. Some of the rest are voluntary. If I decide to turn this way, that's my decision, I'm turning. And there are involuntary responses because I have to maintain my posture. I don't like to fall now. So those are involuntary. So you have both voluntary. Mentioned before, some of the responses we look at each other and say, oh, these are rational responses. And some of the responses, if it emotional areas are activated, they become emotionally driven responses. And all these responses, thinking, planning, are affected by our memory and emotions. And when we are not doing anything, now we have decided not to do anything, not to plan anything, but to sit and meditate. And we try to cover our sensory inputs as well. So we wear the same color, as we decided to wear white. We sit on the floor so that we minimize sensations coming from our seat. And we decided to be at the same level. All that we decided to minimize our sensory inputs. And then we decide to close our eyes also, so we don't see anything. Still, you'll realize there's a lot going in your brain because you have default pathways. When we close our eyes also, we have lot of things come into our brain or the mind. These default pathways are governed by something we call as self-image, which we create. Initially, the self-image is where we are, our orientation. Now, that's in the parietal cortex, where you get sensory information, we know where our, so that it helps us to navigate when we become bigger and bigger. And then later, when we become bigger and bigger, older and older, this self-image is, is expanded, is added. One other thing is through habit. So learning is initially by our parents who are advising us to how to be careful, how to protect ourselves, how to get out of our home. Important for us to have it, defensive mechanism, having it in a eyes closed, even when we don't have, still these default pathways are there. So want to see whether we can have a mechanism to reduce this inner chatter so that we'll be more comfortable. We'll have more rational thinking, and we will be less defensive. We'll be open to others. We'll be open to collaborate. We'll be open to share our ideas, and we'll be open to praise rather than to be judgmental and critical. We'll see whether we can get there. And I'm telling you that we can, because people have found through research that meditation can stretch between, can you remember the prefrontal cortex? Between prefrontal cortex and deep structures we call as limbic system. And the behavior is more rational opposed to emotional. And also research has shown slowing down of default pathways, which cause inner chatter. So self-obsessed mind is quietened, less self-narratives, and freedom from intense defense and related judgment. So lesser activation of the sympathetic nervous system I told you about. Also some structural studies which have looked at the sizes of different areas of the brain. They have found increase nerve fibers, size of the cortical areas, and decrease size of some of the structures like amygdala. Remember the word amygdala? This is one which is activated when we are angry, when we are acting with rage. So that is decreased in people who are meditating for a long time. So this is a diagram. We'll be looking at it later again during the next sessions. Not today, later, if you're interested to join, because there's a lot of information here. This is based on a neuro radiological investigation called fMRI, functional MRI, where you can record the activities going on. So this is a recording in which a person has meditated while fMRI was going on. So the first one here, you can see the person's mind is everywhere, the mind is wandering. And you can see several brain areas are activated. And then he realizes, okay, my mind was wandering. I've been having a lot of inner chatter. And he's trying to focus. And you can see less areas are stimulated. And there's one area that can detect, okay, action. And then he brings his mind back to the focus. You can see more prefrontal cortical areas are stimulated. And in the last one, the person is concentrating, focusing the attention, and you can see only prefrontal cortex area is highly active. So that will happen to you today as well. Your mind will wander, and it's good if you can realize, oh, okay, it has wandered, and then you will get your focus of attention, train your prefrontal cortical neurons. So can you train your neurons? Yes, you can. And can you have structural changes? Yes, you can. This we call as cortical plasticity or neuroplasticity. So when you go on training, when you do repetition, when you try to practice a skill, there are changes in the brain, detectable changes, and there are new pathways, connections we call as synapses initiated. So with this practice, you can, if you regularly do that, you can have functional and structural changes in the brain, which would be positive for us to live and survive, and also for the future. So I'm coming back to Professor John Yates. He had classified different stages of meditation, and his 6th stage is a skilled meditator, which can be achieved by practicing this concentration and maintaining stable attention techniques. And in the end, the person becomes one who is aware of the state of mind at every moment. He's relaxed, alert, active, and he has joy and tranquility. So what we did with our project, with AHEAD funding, was to assess meditation, mindfulness, and health under 5 major areas. So we started from looking at the genes to behavior. So we looked at genetic changes, molecular changes, and then we looked at neurological changes, cardiorespiratory, metabolic. So it's the full thing. You start from the gene to behavior, and also connectedness with nature and psychology, education. We covered a lot. So we have completed the initial part of the study, pre-testing, pilot testing. We have validated all our tools. And now we are in phase 1, in which we have looked at 10 meditators and 10 carefully match non-meditators. So to select these meditators, we went through a very stringent process in which we developed an intake interview, went to several meditation centers, met more than 200 meditators, and then selected around 55 with inclusion criteria. And then we used the intake interview, and we were able to select 12 long-term meditators, out of which we were able to test 10. Right, so we'll see what we have found. With that, you will meet the members of the research team also very quickly. But if you stay on with us, later also you will meet them. They'll be sometime presenting what they have found. So we'll have an active discussion throughout this program. So activity 1, we looked at the effect of meditation on genes, and we found that long-term meditators had significantly higher levels of changes, genetic changes, positive changes, which are related to the stages of mindfulness. And then we looked at oxidative stress, antioxidant capacity, the ability to handle stress. And we looked at it at the molecular level, and we found that long-term meditators have a higher antioxidant capacity. And then we started assessing cardiorespiratory functions, which was, we couldn't do it beyond the pilot level because of corona, because it requires person to exhale and inhale through a tube. But in the pilot testing, we couldn't find a significant difference in the group, but we'll have a larger sample and we'll assess whether the respiratory functions, cardiorespiratory functions are improved in long-term meditators compared to non-meditators. And then we looked at the neurophysiological parameters, and we found that long-term meditation enhances all the cognitive domains. And especially we found very significant results in visuospatial and delayed memory. So if you didn't understand most of it, just know that memory improves significantly in long-term meditators compared to non-meditators. And we were able to detect significant changes in the electroencephalography, that is also recording of the brain, in meditators compared to non-meditators. And we also looked at metabolic and endocrine functions. There was a tendency to be having some protective effects, but the effects were not significant. So we need to have a larger sample on that as well. And we have another project going on looking at the gastroenterology pediatrics group. They are developing an intervention protocol. We are yet to see the results. And we looked at the psychological health, and we found that long-term meditation is capable of enhancing overall mindfulness, and also it improves psychological resilience. We assess that using a software that we purchased through the grant. And we are also planning to assess the effect of meditation on teacher immunity. The protocol is being developed. And also we looked at the effect of meditation with connectedness to nature. And we found that significant links are there between mindfulness and implicit connection with nature in long-term meditators, which will be beneficial for climate mitigation. And also we are looking at the effect of meditation on social harmony. We are developing a protocol to assess social harmony and to look at the effect of meditation. So these are some of the members of our research group going to different meditation centers, learning about meditation. And now we went to community. We discussed with different meditation experts, and we have a group of meditation experts in our research team. Professor Vasanta, Professor Erandi, Jeevani. They are advising us on meditation techniques, and we are recruiting people from different centers. So today we came to the university community, because I think we went all around and came to the university community. So thank you, Professor Chandrika, Madam, for reminding us that we are within an important community which has power to make changes to the whole society. Today the main objective is for us to get together, seek ways as to how we can work together to develop our minds, and we are depending on your feedback. We can bring in different experts, different methods. We are practicing 2 methods today, but you need to give us feedback and tell us how we can continue this process to help each other. Thank you.
ස්තුතියි මැතිණියනි. මීළඟට නියමිතව ඇත්තේ භාවනාව එදිනෙදා ජීවිතයේ ප්‍රායෝගික පරිශීලනයෙහිලා මනා අත්දැකීම් සම්භාරයක් සහිත විද්වත් මඩුල්ලක් මගින් මෙහෙවනු ලබන භාවනාව පිළිබඳ මූලික හැඳින්වීමකටයි. මෙම වැඩසටහන මෙහෙවීමට මම ආරාධනා කර සිටිනවා කොළඹ විශ්වවිද්‍යාලයේ අධ්‍යාපන පීඨයේ ජ්‍යෙෂ්ඨ කතිකාචාර්ය ජීවනී හේරත් මැතිණියට.
நன்றி மேடம். அடுத்தபடியாக இத்துறைசார் நிபுணர்களை அறிமுகப்படுத்துவதற்காக கொழும்பு பல்கலைக்கழக கல்வித்துறை சிரேஷ்ட விரிவுரையாளரும் இக்குழுவின் துணை ஒருங்கிணைப்பாளருமான மிஸ் ஜீவனி ஹேரத் அவர்களை அன்புடன் அழைக்கிறேன்.
Thank you very much. May I cordially invite Mrs. Jeevani Herath, Senior Lecturer in Education of the Faculty of Education, University of Colombo, and Deputy Coordinator of the Research Group, to introduce the panel of professionals who are present here with us today, who have incorporated meditation into their daily life. Over to you.
Thank you, Kumarangi, James, and Chamila. There's a phrase which says, if you can't go outside, go inside, which actually doesn't mean that if you have to physically not going outside, just stay inside. It is about going inside your mind and body to understand the concept of the creation of I, me, and myself. To understand that there are many meditative techniques that you can use and to see how it works. So we have a panel of experts. Today we have two people here, Professor Vasantha Gunatunga and Professor Arundhati Lokupitiya. Professor Vasantha Gunatunga is the head of the Department of Community Medicine of the Faculty of Medicine of University of Colombo, a practitioner of meditation, a trainer, and his main interest is to find out the complementary association between the body, mind, and the consciousness. So today he will teach you one method of meditation which you can try out and see whether the things that are related to meditation, what we said here now, is true or false. And the other expert we have is Professor Arundhati Lokupitiya from the Department of Zoology and Environment Sciences of the Faculty of Science of University of Colombo. She is a senior lecturer there, a member of the team of research that we are conducting. And she has been meditating for quite some time in seclusion. She is not a trainer, but she actually very gracefully came here today to train you in another technique, which is breath meditation. So she will have a small session with you to train you on breath meditation. So I first cordially invite Professor Vasantha Gunatunga to do his presentation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Jeevani. Madam President, Madam Vice Chancellor, Dean Sir, ladies and gentlemen. I will start with the constituents of a human being. First, we have to know what we are. As you know, we have a physical body. You know that we also have a mind. We have a memory bank or memory store. There are three things. We have these three things basically everybody, irrespective of religion, irrespective of caste, creed, nationality, all of us are having a physical body, mind, and a memory store. So we'll see what the mind is doing. Now we are dealing here mostly with mind, but you can't deal with the mind without the physical body and the memory, because mind never exists without a physical body. And if you want to ask any question regarding this, you can ask little later. Now see what will happen to the mind, what happens to the mind in normal circumstances. Now you see it has three sources of information. We all the time get information from our physical body. As Dr. Dilshani said, we have a sense of whether we are sitting or standing or walking. That means we have continuous information from the physical body. We feel hunger, we feel thirst and all that. We feel pain. And then we have another source. We have the outer environment from which we tap a lot of information. It is easy if you get the analogy of computer to describe this, how a human being works. The computer has input devices, keyboard, mouse, webcam, joystick, like that, many scanners. Likewise, we also have eye, ear, nose, tongue and the entire physical body to capture information on the external world. So we have the external world captured by these 5 sensory input devices. Then we get information from our stored memory also. We remember how we left home, our children at home, our parents at home, then our work, what to be done tomorrow, and the mistakes that we did couple of minutes ago. In our memory store. So we get thoughts one after the other. We never get 2 thoughts at the same time in the mind. You remember that. So we are bombarded with all this information one after the other, non-stop, and we don't have a solace even during sleep. We think we are sleeping, but still when the 5 sensory input devices are shut, we are dealing with the physical body. When in our deep sleep, we let go that also automatically, but we cannot let go our store of memories. We are dealing with that continuously. Things that we remember, we call dreams. You remember, we have vivid pieces of videos that are connected in a dream. Sometimes we cannot describe how they are connected. So these pieces of information, videos are there in the memory, and we see those during sleep. And deep sleep, we don't remember what we are doing, but this never stops. So then we call this stress. We cannot stop it. A computer can be shut down. A person cannot be shut down. So we are going through this continuously. So we need some kind of a relief. Primarily for that relief, people try various methods. Now, meditation is one of these methods. So look at this picture for you to get some idea the analogy between the human being and a computer. We have the external environment on your right side, and then 5 input devices, and then they are taken to the mind. Mind can either take those information or not take it. If the mind takes it, the mind gives it a value, and once a value is given, it is automatically stored. You have no control over that. Once the mind captures it, given a value, it gets automatically stored. You have this big bucket shown there. That is your memory. And once there, it pops back into the mind, creating thoughts, and you have no control over that as well. And that is the difference between the computer and a human being. This automatic pop-up is not there in a computer. You have to program it. If you program it, it will be there. Otherwise, it is not there. Now, in ourselves, we don't have to program it. It is already there. This is the problem. We cannot get out of these memories. Sometimes we taking a lot of things, as was said earlier, and then they pop up back into the memory, and this is where stress is created. Some people have this effect more than others. It depends on the individual. We'll talk later how it happens. So now, if we are to stop this, we need to stop these three sources of information: outside, physical body, and store of memories. The mind is made of an array of thoughts that are coming from these three sources. If you completely stop this, mind ceases to exist. And that is where you get 100% freedom from this stress. It can be done. I will teach you a simple method that can be used to stop this. If you train enough, if you are into it, you will see that on one day that you are able to stop all these three and you are 100% free from your physical body, from the external world, from your memory store. Technically, that means you are not existing at that point. And if you can maintain that as long as you want, you are free. With that, you get various aspects of understanding of myself, how it works, why this is being continuous, and why can't one stop this, and how we can stop it, and how you feel when you stop it, and the method of it. You will realize as you go on, without my telling, without anybody's telling, you will realize it for yourself. All these things, don't believe anything that I said, unless you go through it and you realize it yourself. Okay, the method is like this, very simple. We give a task to the mind. The mind can never exist without doing something. It has to engage with some kind of a form to exist. So you give a task to the mind so that mind is freed from these three sources of information. Then we'll realize what will happen. The task is you get the mind to scan your body. You know, the scan has a probe. Mind is the probe in this case. I'll give you a simple technique. This technique has 6 body parts. Top of the head, right arm, chest, left arm, right leg, left leg. You use a verse to remove attachment and conflict with anything. That is compassion. Compassion is linked with any religion. So you can do without connecting to your religion. This is for everybody. The verse that we use is, may all be well, happy, and peaceful. Or you use your mother tongue. You can say, Siyalu Sattva Nirogi Vettva Niduk Vettva Suwapat Vettva. Or Ellorum Nalamahum, Impamahum, Amidiyahum, Irupamahum. Any other language, you can translate this to your language. And this is extending compassion to everybody, every being. That removes attachment and also conflict, because love and compassion are two different things. Love comes always with an attachment. Compassion is not so. So we use compassion to remove attachment and aversion. So use this verse to start scanning the body. Then as you go along, at one point, you will probably not need this language, and it goes without language after that, and compassion is self-charged. Okay, that is the description. I will take you through 2 rounds. Okay, all right. Okay, we'll go to the meditation after the next presentation, and then I can start training on this.
Thank you, Professor, for your analysis of the mind. We will have your meditation hands-on experience after Professor Irandati Lokupitiya's presentation. Professor, over to you to do your presentation.
Good morning. I hope you all can hear me. And it's a great pleasure to be here today. Like Jeevani mentioned, I have been a silent meditator for so many years. And actually my meditation guru was Venerable Dankande Dhammaratana Thero, who is not there anymore. Anyway, I have been meditating. And so I like to see you all here. Plus also I heard that more than 200 people have gathered on Zoom. So that's a good thing. So we all are here for a common purpose. And I hope you all will learn something today from all of us. And so why do we meditate? And I also like to see the university from top to bottom. Everybody is here, starting from our Vice Chancellor to different layers of employees and our students. Everybody is there. So it's a great pleasure that we all are here for a common purpose to do some meditation. So why do we meditate? Just like Professor Vasantha and Dilshani mentioned, she mentioned about continuous inner chatter, and you also mentioned about mind wandering, because our mind, it always like to wander, right? It's so hard to tame it. So you do meditation to tame your mind, right? Although you can keep your body at this moment, maybe your mind, it would go maybe 10 years to the time 10 years back. Then it would be thinking unnecessarily about so many things, and it might end up you having unnecessary feelings like even anger, hatred sometimes. What a waste of time and what a waste of thoughts. So to get rid of those unnecessary thoughts and your mind wandering, we practice meditation. So it helps you having fewer thoughts and purify your mind, right? And the clearer your mind is, with less thoughts, it's easy for you to concentrate. Now you all are here, you have all given up or left behind all your work, office work, and now you are more relaxed, right? So with less thoughts, so that means you have the proper background for meditation, I think. So the fewer your thoughts are, the more you would be able to concentrate, because key to meditation is being able to concentrate, right? You are moving towards toward the single pointedness from but first you have to have the background prepared for your meditation, right? So you have to be happy. Being happy is essential. I mean, you cannot, better to have, it's always good to have a happy mind. That's what all religious leaders have advised. Be happy, right? So being happy and peaceful, devoid of unnecessary attachments and feelings, right? Attachments could be both positive and negative, I would say. You must be spreading loving kindness, or maybe you must be in anger with someone. Both are bad, right? So you have to have a clear mind with less attachments when you try to meditate. So to elaborate it further, I put these two pictures. So if you look at this left figure, it's a field full of weeds, right? And on the right side, you can see a nice vegetable bed. So for your plants to grow, you have to remove all your weeds. Meditation means bhavana in Pali. Bhavana means cultivation. You are going to cultivate your mind. For your mind to grow, you need to remove all the weeds. I mean, you cannot expect meditation to grow or your mind to grow in a field with bad thoughts, bad feelings, right? So for it to effectively grow, you need to remove all your weeds in your mind. So what do we do? Actually, you know this life. When you advance in meditation, you will realize the truth of life. It's very impermanent. You are there and you came to this world alone, and then you develop so many connections with so many people, but you must be ready to die anytime. You know, now under the COVID-19 situation, and even there are so many road accidents, you don't know where you will die. But the moment you die, you should be ready to die, right? So meditation helps you to have connection with the people without having attachment. You know, even Professor Vasanta was mentioning about having no attachment. So of course, you have to take care of your family. You have to do your work. You have to be a good worker. You have to be respectful to everyone. You have to love people, your family. You have to do all that. But the moment you die, you have to be prepared for that. So meditation helps you in that preparation. So to prepare the background, even if you can follow the 5 precepts because I'm a Buddhist, the basic principles in Buddhism in your daily life are 5 precepts. If you can follow those, even that will help you become a good meditator. No killing. You are not harming any animal. No stealing. This is true for any religion. So that's why I thought of mentioning about those. No adultery. You should be able to happy with only one person. No lying, because then you are cheating people. And sobriety. Alcohol damages so many people's lives. It confuses your mind. So for you to meditate, sobriety is good. So, and also learning to give up or give away things will just let things go easily, will make you better prepared for meditation. It doesn't mean that you have to be a passive negative person. You have to be a positive person. But whatever, if you live at this moment, if you being mindfulness, when this moment is past, it's gone. Then your mind is again free. So this is something even very useful when you do in your work, when you do your work, because you have to concentrate on it, on your work. So you do the thing, concentrating on it. Once it's done, it's gone. You don't even have to think about it. So it's good time management, less waste of thoughts, everything is there. But sometimes maybe when you are becoming more efficient like that, maybe you will get more and more work from your boss or your immediate supervisor. So that is there also. But then it's okay. You are doing some good to the outer world. You are doing some good to others, right? So in Buddhism, there are these 4 things called Satara Brahma Viharana. This is good for anybody in any religion. If you can practice it, you can do all these separately as meditation practice as well, plus also in your day-to-day life to prepare your mind. These 4 are very important. Compassion. Even Professor Vasanta mentioned about it. Loving kindness. You can spread love to everybody, right? Compassion, it helps. Kindness. Like he said, may all beings be healthy. Compassion. Kindness. Karunava. Nidukvetva. May all beings be devoid of any sorrow or suffering, right? Altruistic joy. That is very important. If you can have this, it's muditava. That means you think, let all the other beings be better off than me. Then you don't have any problem, no? If you wish the best for the others, then you don't have to worry about anything. So altruistic joy, muditava. Equanimity, upekshava. If you can look at things at a neutral mind, or things happen for a reason, and just take things with a stable mind, neutral mind, then that will help. So I summarized the benefits of meditation. It will help you eventually realize the impermanence of existence. Of course, you must have already realized it. Maybe somebody yesterday, he must have won a lottery, but today he may die, you know. So it helps you realize the impermanence of existence, not by just looking outside, you will understand it. But to realize it by yourself, you truly have to meditate to know the exact truth. And it makes you a mindful person in your actions. So that's why it will make you a better, efficient person. And it benefits your work life by making you a more efficient person with good time management, as I mentioned. And it will make you happier. And it makes things simpler for you. You know, you won't complicate things because you live at the moment, do the right thing at that time. So things are simple. Your needs and desires will be less. And you will have a better tolerance what is happening around you. So earlier, if you used to look at something with anger, if you didn't like something, you know, so there are some people who say, I can't even stand that person. Why? Because he's also another being made of Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayu, so you will learn to be tolerant of what's going on in your surroundings. So that's all I have here. So it's a nice atmosphere, better than what it used to be in the past. So I hope you will get a good experience today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.